What's up, guys? Welcome to Air Channel. I got an email from Greg. Shout out to Greg. He was asking why Utah is number one in porn prescriptions in the U.S. I think I've got a pretty good answer for this. So let's get into it. First, I'll start with the history of the Mormon Church, a little bit of the history. Joseph Smith was actually a polygamist, um, and the Mormon Church was actually started as a polygamist sex cult. Joseph Smith was also a child rapist and a pedophile. He had over 30 documented wives, several of which were young girls, 12 years old, 14 years old. This is why he was ran out of every town that he went into and eventually murdered by a mob, because he was a crook, a con man, a polygamist, and a child rapist, a pedophile. Um, Joseph Smith is probably the greatest cult leader of all time. He still has millions of followers today who revere him, and Mormons actually worship him. They won't, if you ask them, they'll say that they do not worship him, but they actually do. There are pictures of him plastered all over their churches. If you go into any practicing Mormon's home, you will find pictures and statues and sayings by Joseph Smith all over their house. And they believe that when Judgment Day comes, they will be judged by God, and Joseph Smith will be at the right hand of God, and Jesus will be at the left. So they believe they will be judged by Joseph Smith, and they do worship him. So that's how the Mormon Church got started. It was a polygamous sex cult. They have a horrible past of shady past, filled with sexual misconduct, polygamy, child rape, and child abuse. Utah is a horrible rape culture. Girls are taught at a very young age that if they lose their virtue, they're as undesirable as chewed bubblegum. This happened to Elizabeth Smart, who was abducted and raped, and she felt that she was worthless and as undesirable as chewed bubblegum because she was taught this. Thankfully, she got out of the cult and has left the Mormon Church. I'm very happy for that. They ended polygamy in 1890 because the federal government threatened to come in and start breaking it up and arresting people and throwing them in jail and cut off federal funding. So the Mormon Church did end polygamy in 1890 after a lot of fighting with the federal government. They finally did end it. Another sect popped up, the Fundamentalist Mormons, who there are several sects of them still to this day who still practice polygamy. But the reason that Utah is number one in porn prescriptions, online porn prescriptions, is because Mormons are the most sexually repressed group of people in America. Men are taught, starting at a very young age, that masturbation is a forbidden sin. Lusting after women is forbidden sin, unforgivable sin. Thinking of sex, anything that has to do with sex, is forbidden, unclean, and an unforgivable sin. Fornication is an unforgivable sin, along with murder. Those are the only two unforgivable sins in the Mormon cult, and fornication is right up there with murder. When I was a kid growing up in the 80s, we were all shipped into a bigger town to go to school, and I went to a pretty big middle school, probably about 1,000 kids. And it was filled with porn. There was porn everywhere. The first time I saw porn, I was 11 years old. Some kid brought it to school, which was strange because porn was illegal in Utah in the 80s. I don't know if it still is. I left that shithole state in the 90s. It's a beautiful place, but it's a complete shithole. It's the most unfree state in America. Completely ran from top to bottom by Mormons, by the Mormon Church. Utah has a horrible rape culture as well. If females are raped and come forward to the leadership of the Mormon Church, they're usually kicked out of the church, and the male is kept in good standing. This just happened at BYU a while back. A female came forward with rape allegations against a guy. She was kicked out of school, and she was also kicked out of church. And the male was kept in good standing, and that's usually how it works in Utah and in the Mormon church. The Mormon church is a breeding ground for pedophiles. It's easy for them to work their way in and get access to children. There have been thousands of cases of child abuse and child rape in Utah. Since Utah runs everything, they're able to cover it up pretty well, but it's a horrible problem in the church. And they're the most sexually repressed group in America, for sure. And the cult strips them of their personality and replaces it with the cult personality, and they become part of the collective, and they are controlled completely by the cult. They are told what to wear, they are told what they can eat and drink, they are told how men are not able to grow beards, everything. They're completely controlled, even their sex life. The cult looks at their finances and gets their financial records to make sure they're paying enough tithing. And the cult also controls what goes on in a Mormon married couple's bedroom. The only thing that is allowed sexually, if you are a Mormon, is missionary position sex, and it is frowned upon to even have sex for pleasure. It should mainly be just to reproduce. So they're completely sexually repressed, which is very unhealthy and unnatural. Sex is the most natural thing you can do. It is actually good for you. It builds your immune system. It releases dopamine and serotonin. It creates a feeling of connectedness, all sorts of things. There's absolutely nothing wrong with sex and seeking out your sexual desires. It's completely normal and natural. And when you suppress your sexuality, I think that it makes them very unhappy because it's so unnatural, and they seek out that sexuality in other ways, like porn. So that's why I believe Utah is the #1 leader in porn prescriptions. Thanks, guys. Remember to breathe.